Loosey goosey.
Recording again.
We're on.
We're on.
3, 2, 1 live.
In 5, 4, 1.
7.
That's confusing.
All right.
What's our YouTube name?
On the mic.
We're on the mic.
We're on the mic.
All right. Where were we? We were talking about
Turn
healthcare.
on the mic. That's the.
Turn on the mic.
We're talking about free education.
Well,
Would it be
free
for
education. I just
everyone
wanted
or
to make a
just for
clarification that I think that it would be best to do it for doctors first,
Make
so
it
that
a
we
more
can see.
insidious crawl, towards the.
Fuck that. I want to go all the way.
Well, that'd be nice for sure. But if we could start with one thing, I'd be
I suppose.
a little bit happier.
Dan, there's this thing called. Oh my God! Wow, that's bad.
Compromise?
I lost it. No, I was thinking about
Incrementalism. You fucker.
Appeasement?
seducing. You gotta seduce them, Dan.
Dude, fuck that. People are into the free education. They're buying it.
Foreplay.
Get out of
Dan.
here.
Well, and do you do trade schools or like how far do you go with the free education?
Well,
Yes.
How about we look?
most proposals out there right now start with just public universities.
Yeah.
If we want to talk trade school, I think it should be all the way. Trade schools. I don't like the idea of. I don't know. What do you guys feel about private?
Or it could just be
private
subsidized.
universities in a free education environment? You think they should just still totally exist the way they are? You got to pay for it.
Yeah,
I'm
I think
sure
we
it'll
should.
affect the cost having public universities be free.
Mhm.
I bet it'll drive costs down at private universities.
I think you should be able to do whatever the fuck you want
Yeah.
if it's private, as long as you're not like beating children. You know?
I do think you should be able to get grants though, like you can now,
Right.
where but not based on. Well, that's hard because based on need, it'd be nice if it was more like I'm going to school, therefore I get this much as a stipend, as opposed to, oh, you don't make enough or your parents don't make
Right.
enough, so here, because I feel like that lets a lot of people fall through the gaps.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think private universities are fine as long as we are helping people go to them, so they're not just for the wealthy.
Yeah. Well, there's an argument to be made. I don't necessarily have an opinion on this one yet, but there's an argument to be made that, especially with before college, but including college too, maybe, that there's something dangerous in a democracy about having separate education tracks based off wealth, because that lends to undermine the democracy and create kind of a de facto aristocracy.
Right. Yeah. Well, we kind of have that already.
Yeah, that's currently what we
Ivy-
have.
Ivy
We have a
Tower,
de facto
you know?
aristocracy.
Yeah.
The thing that I do, the only thing that I like about private education is the fact that they can be experimental, because
Well, and oftentimes they're really high quality.
Yeah.
Our public education is kind of shit.
Exactly.
So,
the thing is, I want most of the resources being funneled, but this is probably just a philosophical thing for me. But it's I think most of the resources should be funneled towards the public, just because it's that sustaining aspect of things, where
Right.
it's we need to have a really good,
it's the
super
foundation
solid,
of the society.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then from there, yeah, I think private is cool because you do get to experiment, and then I feel like they're the safe zone for learning how you want to change the public system to make it more efficient and stuff
Yeah.
like that, or make it more whatever, increase the actual education that's occurring.
Yeah.
So I think that it should still exist, but I don't think that it should at all be an excuse not to give more resources to public at all.
Right.
That's why I don't know if I can see grants. I can see grants, but I don't want it to be at all taking away from public.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about the idea of merit-based grants instead of need-based grants? We kind of sort of do that already, but make it easier, so it's a pool that you apply to, and it's based you could write an essay if you want, or you can just do test scores or something. I just feel we need to incentivize that more. I was told in school that if I get good grades and all this bullshit, then I'll get money to go to school, and then that turned out to be not really very true. I got some from the school for having good grades, but that was about it. And so I feel if we could make it so that private universities were essentially free if you had good enough grades or something, then that makes a track for poor people to still go to those private universities
Through their
based
hard work.
on hard work
Right.
and merit,
Right.
which is more
Yeah, I
kind
like
of like the American dream style
Well,
thinking.
so I think it's difficult because there's also like I think there's plenty of education programs that we can look to in order to see like how they're playing out, because you look at like things over in Europe, some of the education systems there have those kind of incremental systems where they say, if you're good at these classes, if you're good at the math and sciences, you're going to go on this track. And if you're like semi-okay, but you also show a lot of application of like really like artisan type stuff, like really crafting kind of stuff, you'll go into this section where you'll probably do a trade school. And then if you're not even that, you have this other education that's like the bare minimum education where you will probably do something like be a barista or server or something like that, or like help out somehow like for the community.
So this is on topic. Is one of the notes I wanted to bring up is that we just hit for the first time $1.5 trillion in student debt in this country right now.
Wow.
And so there's that to discuss. But then there's also a problem where the big banks are doing the same kind of shit that crashed the economy in 2008, where they're bundling debt and betting on it.
Really?
Except they're doing it this time with student and consumer debt. And we should note that consumer debt, so credit cards, car loans, all that kind of shit, that's currently at $4 trillion.
My God.
And this is part of the reason why they're expecting the economy to crash again within a year or so. And many are saying it's probably going to be worse than 2008 for a variety of reasons. One, it's more politically unstable than it was at that time. Two, we've already exhausted many of our options. So what we did last time was we bailed out the companies,
Right.
and then we set interest rate at almost zero to spur development. So they can borrow money from the government at almost no interest. And
Which was obvious.
but we haven't raised interest rates since 2008. I mean, I think just a tiny bit, but we're out of our bag of tricks. You can't lower them anymore.
Yeah, just obvious. I think that was like obviously a bad.
Oh, it was a stupid move. Yeah, you should, in my opinion, you should have let the companies fail. You should have bailed out the consumers, the people who actually lost money because of that activity, and then something like a massive jobs program, which could
I
have
think
been
we
a
should have banned those practices for sure. Also.
Yeah,
The
for
debt
sure. Yeah, we barely even touched it. I mean, Dodd-Frank has also been rolled back, and that was already too little.
Yeah.
So we're in a shit show.
That's
But yeah, 1.5 trillion student debt, and we should note that also cannot go away by declaring bankruptcy,
Yeah, it's stuck forever.
and it doesn't go away from you dying. They give it to your next of kin.
Oh my God, that's fucked up.
What
Yep.
the fuck?
Yep.
Yeah, no. I mean, I don't even know. Yeah, I don't even know where to start with that. That's
Yeah.
just literally like, that is like the opposite of free education. That is literally like the most opposite.
It's like creating a generation of sharecroppers or serfs.
You can you can become born into debt because your parents went to school.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all I saw was it passing from you to your parents. That was the example they used.
So it can go.
I
up
haven't read the
generations,
exact
but not down.
language. I don't know. But it just said it would go to your next of kin. So
God,
I don't know if there's a
that
rule
sucks.
about that makes it
Like what if
specified.
somebody goes to medical school and then dies like the year they graduate?
No, that was one of the examples. Is
Like $300,000 in debt.
is this kid died and then his parents got stuck with all his medical or all his school costs.
My
His whole
God.
debt.
That's terrible.
Do we know what the rationale for that is? Like why they think that that should?
I don't know.
That's ridiculous.
I'm not sure. I'd have to do more research.
Okay.
I know
What do
a
you
lot
think
of these
about that,
policies were put in place. There was another student loan crisis, like during the Reagan administration, and they responded with some of these punitive measures. But I think they made the problem worse, not better. So I don't really know.
Well, the thing is, yeah, we just bailed out the companies. They didn't learn from their mistakes.
No.
Well, I just went to Bend, and the housing market is just bubbling like it was in 2007, 2008. And it's the same shit. Yeah, and yeah, we thought we fixed the first one, but now the second one's going to come and it's going to be worse.
It's just who thought that?
I don't know who thought that.
Who thought we fixed
Well,
it?
because we got, like, right now jobs.
They certainly
like,
tried to convince us they fixed it.
Yeah.
this recovering economy and all that shit.
The thing is, the way we play with our money, it's like we're trying to make money grow, but we're not actually like increasing production. We're not increasing real wealth.
Mm-mm.
There's not real wealth. It's just
Exactly.
we're finding different ways to split money up to make it look like we're a wealthier country than we are.
I do think that wealth is overall increasing. I think we would probably find stats on that. But I also do think that the way the fiat money system works, it does have a tendency to make, like, I mean, inflation of 3.5% every year is average. So, like, that's normal, that it's just our money is getting less and less valuable over time. And so I don't necessarily understand how all of that works, but it does seem like we're playing a lot of weird money games that aren't necessarily beneficial. Talking about what causes inflation. So there's two types of inflation. There's demand pull and there's cost push inflation. So both types of inflation cause an increase in the overall price level within an economy. So demand pull inflation, just reading right off of the website here, occurs when aggregate demand for goods and services in an economy rises more rapidly than an economy's productive capacity. One potential shock to aggregate demand might come from a central bank that rapidly increases the supply of money. So the increase in money in the economy will increase demand for goods and services, and in the short run, businesses cannot significantly increase production and supply remains constant. So the economy's equilibrium moves and prices will tend to rise, resulting in inflation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then cost push inflation, on the other hand, occurs when prices of production process inputs increase. Rapid wage increases or rising raw material prices are common causes of this type of inflation.
Okay.
A sharp rise in the price of imported oil during the 1970s provided a typical example of cost push. So either the demand increases too quickly for the supply to catch up, or something in the supply line increases in cost, therefore making the good more expensive to produce. That's what I'm getting out of that.
Yeah.
And so those things are, like, demand increasing is typically like a good sign in the economy, from what I understand, but it does cause inflation because the demand increases and then the supply cannot increase as quickly, and so it's always like chasing it basically. And because as demand increases, then supply will increase to meet demand until they intersect, and then as supply increases, demand often increases more, so they sort of chase one another. The interesting thing to note, though, is that as inflation is relatively consistent over the years, in terms of, like, you can look at it on a graph, and they use the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, to map inflation, which is basically like a basket of goods that are
a random sort of goods, and they go and see what it costs.
And they see the cost difference, right? And so it's typically, I want to say 3% per year. I can look up to be sure. But the thing that's one of the problems that we've been seeing is that wages have not been increasing to match that. And so the buying power of the consumer has gone down, and they're purchasing,
so you can either look at it as wages going down or as prices going up, but either way, the actual buying power of Americans is decreasing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Another thing with inflation that we have to consider is that there's an artificial barrier to our inflation running away in America, which is our empire, because we have the world's reserve currency. And because of that, our dollar is much more stable than any other country's currency. So,
current inflation rate for the United States is 2.9%. The 12 months ended in July. Just as a...
Which is also a significant concern, though, because, I mean, so, like, when Britain lost their pound as the world's reserve currency when their empire fell, their economy fucking took a nosedive. And that's, like, one of the core things that other countries are trying to do right now is get our dollar no longer as the world's reserve currency, which would essentially tank our empire overnight and throw our economy into a tailspin. So,
yay.
That's something to think about too.
Yeah, no more need for the American empire. Just
that's, again, though, it's weird to me because, like, the whole idea of, like, the demand thing too is really confusing to me too, because it's like increasing demand seems like such a sketchy even idea to have, because it's like you have a demand for things, like people want it, right? Isn't that like just the demand is like they want something, right? And it's not like
the potential of people to buy something. people wanting to buy something.
Yeah.
So how many consumers of a product are there?
Right, and then you
Or
would think
potential
that that would
consumers.
be either because they needed to physically survive.
So you're asking, why is demand increasing? Why does it increase?
Well,
Are
there
we
would be
getting-
like, I feel like there would be logical reasonings behind it. It's like if we have more people, you obviously demand would increase.
Certainly.
Well, I think
But-
demand is also going to be tied to people's buying power. So demand goes down when people's buying power goes down.
But I don't really think that's. I mean, that's a weird way of doing it. That might be true. I'm just saying, like, the idea would be like if you had the opportunity to buy a computer
Mhm.
because you had enough money, you would want to buy it.
Right.
So it's like you're kind of like you're playing with people's opportunity to buy things rather than the actual demand for it. It's not as though that demand went away actually. It's like the moment that they get enough resources.
So you're
for
saying
it.
you're thinking of demand as someone's actual desire to have something, as opposed to demand in the economic sense, which is people trying to buy something
Well, people-
with resources they have.
I feel like people being it's like people's ability to buy something too.
Well, it's
Well,
more
demand-
than that, because
yeah.
demand for a particular thing is based on how much a person wants to buy it. Like,
Yeah.
given the capability,
No, real.
how much do they want it?
Yeah, and there is like that, like, yeah, the interplay for it, but that's gonna be based on someone's like personality or like what they
Right.
want for that.
But economists make sort of generalized ideas of that type of desire.
I don't even know how to like really describe this, but it's kind of like you could get people if you wanted to like not want a healthy way of living, just so that they could buy that thing that's not healthy for them.
Oh, absolutely.
And so like
Yeah.
like that in and of itself seems like unethical.
Well, then by that notion, advertising itself is unethical. Which, in a sense, I mean, it even invalidates
I would say false
capitalistic
advertising.
theory. Because I mean, that's the whole thing is advertising. It's some are more accurate than others based on how good the product is. But
Right.
all advertising's only goal is gets people to buy my product.
Right.
So the variable is the product, not the advertising.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like what Noam Chomsky says is so like I mean, it invalidates capitalistic theory to have advertising the way it exists, because per Adam Smith, a capitalist economy is informed consumers making rational choices.
Right, exactly.
And that's what makes the market function the way we say it does.
Yeah, and the fact
Yet
that
the
we have
whole point of advertising is to create uninformed consumers who will make irrational choices.
I wouldn't say the whole point, but I would say how it's being used for
I think,
sure.
I think the major point of our current advertising
Yeah.
is to do that.
Because like
Although there are certain products that
Yeah, they don't have to lie because it's a good product.
exactly.
But all products are going to advertise, and unless most products are really good, most are lying.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think. It's crazy to think how much psychological manipulation goes into it.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
scientific evidence
Oh,
of how
yeah.
to trick people.
It's like Coca-Cola opening a bottle of happiness.
God.
So
The company's
this is
so
sugar
disgusting.
water. Is this how you're gonna be happy?
Yeah, and think about
Yeah.
like all the cigarettes, all their advertising shit they did.
Yeah.
But I think that those even can be accounted for if you literally if it was like a nutrition fact, if it was a nutrition fact kind of thing.
Yeah, well, that's what Chomsky says is like real advertising would be a list of information about the product, just purely objective without anything.
Yeah.
Like, here is
Well-
the product we have for sale. Here are the statistical information regarding this product.
I just at least want
Here is
both.
consumer reviews.
Which
and,
you should be able to do, yeah. Just be
Yeah.
like, this is the computer for sale. Here's all the specs. Here's the price. Do you want to buy it?
It
or
just
not?
takes more effort in this day and age to do that kind of shopping.
Well, and I mean, if all they're
Especially very
measured
small.
by is the profit motive, they have no incentive to be honest. They
Well,
have an
that's why-
incentive to do whatever it takes to get you to buy it.
But-
Apple is one of the most successful companies because they're selling you a brand. They're not.
See, and that's another
Like-
thing.
Yeah.
Another
they
thing I'd
overprice
really.
all of it.
Oh yeah,
You're
absolutely.
buying like a lifestyle.
But that's kind of one of the weird things about modern capitalism is this idea of like the merging of brand and identity. It's like
Yes.
they're selling you a lifestyle, not things you need anymore. It's like creating this caricature, and when one has been used up, they have to move on to the next one. And it's constantly creating this empty, this void that you have to fill, and it's
Yeah, it's just
really
a
gross.
consumer
It is
race. Yeah.
The same thing is done with advertising for like beauty products. or
yeah,
stuff
that's
like
one of
that.
the worst ones.
Just
Just
making
make this
people feel like shit.
make this perpetual insecurity,
Mhm.
and then tell them they can only fill it by buying your product.
Yeah.
And so you've created this consumer base artificially that's making people's lives worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're running into a lot of interesting, I feel like this is sort of an overarching topic that we've been touching on a lot today. We're running into a lot of interesting areas where it seems like the answer would be some sort of government intervention, but the types of intervention that seem like they would be effective border on very authoritarian means.
Yeah, which I'm also really against. So.
Right. So it's a very interesting place to be where I feel like I'm very anti-big government. Like
Me
I would
too.
prefer smaller government as much as possible. But there's all these avenues or all these interesting areas like YouTube and Google being censored or like being allowed to censor things. And then, now we're talking about the advertising industry. Like maybe we should put more restrictions on what they can and can't say. But again, like we're getting a lot more medley, we're meddling in lots of things.
One thing that I would like to bring up to get that idea, though, like a little bit more, I guess, modern, rather than in that kind of way where it's like, I don't want an authoritarian government. Like, totally, I agree with that, but in that concept, it is very much that the government controls everything. Basically everything in authoritarian. It's like they control basically everything, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what that implies is there's, like, a ratio of, like, where is your freedom and where are the things that you're giving up for that, guess to protect that
The
freedom.
social contract.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then the thing that I would like to argue is that I think that our society is much more complex now than it was back in when we created America, or even like before, because it's like, I don't think that it has been elucidated very well how different our society is, both like culturally, like the ability, I guess, how different, the potential to be more complex now is so astronomically bigger than it was back in the day. We have more resources. We have the ability to create new chemicals, new dyes, new medicine, all of these new things, right?
Well, it's just we're connected more than ever.
That too.
We're on a global market.
But it's not even. It's like we have to think on an intellectual level. Ideas have like evolved dramatically in a very short period of time.
That can spread.
Totally.
Yeah, the amount of knowledge.
So,
in the world.
I think that there needs to be a discussion about what it really means to have a big government. Because in, like, my mind, it's like a big government is like we're talking a ratio. It's like if the government owns 50%, or more than 50%, now we have more government than freedom or whatever, and now it's a big government. And, like,
So what
what
makes it
is
big?
it?
That is an interesting discussion, because I know that one of the things I think about a lot is one of the kind of like the talking points of Republicans nowadays is the idea that the size of government is equivalent to the amount of money that flows through it, which I think is bullshit. I mean, if you're using government for single-payer healthcare, I don't think that gives the government more power over you.
Right.
And I try to think of things in terms of like, how much can the government inhibit your freedoms, your liberties?
Right.
That to me is government power. And that's the size of government that I'm concerned about. I'm not concerned about us utilizing government to provide free education and free healthcare, because I think that makes us more free in my mind. What I'm concerned about is, war power, presidential power, ability to infringe on free speech, or police state, or spying, or all of these things. The merging of corporate interests with politicians. All those things. That's what concerns me. To me, that's government power, because it's power it can use against the people.
Right.
And I guess some people would say, if government's giving you health care, then, they can then be in a position to fuck with it because they have a monopoly on that function.
Totally.
But I don't know. I don't buy that argument myself.
I mean, do you guys...
I was going to ask what Sean had to say about that.
Well, yeah, I think if you're taking more taxes from your paycheck to give to the government, and then they get to decide how
If they get
where
to
we're
decide.
stuck, where we have this empire that no one really wants, and we haven't voted on it.
No.
It's just a thing that we do that no one talks about.
Yeah, we don't even use the word.
Yeah. So unless we can pay
World
taxes,
police or
I think the only way to do it is to
indispensable nation.
so much taxes is going to healthcare. So it's actually like taken out from. Because then, yeah, like say we give like 40% of all the money we earn to the government, then the government has the power to spend it however they want. If they want to spend it on healthcare, on the empire, on education, on whatever.
Well, I mean, a lot of things can specify where the tax revenue goes. You know, so if you have Medicare for all, you say, okay, well, here's a tax that specifically goes to that for us to use that money to pay for medical services. You know,
And then big government can be almost anything. It's more just how it's structured.
Yeah.
If it's still big, but it's run by the people, run by a democracy, republic, then it's not necessarily a bad thing as long as you still have control over where the power and the money's spent.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's also the difficulty that arises when we think in like a comparison kind of way with like if we go back to when the Constitution was written, we see that there was like the forms of power that could be had. I feel like were vastly different than they are now because we didn't have a lot of the information that we do about like the psychological. Like we couldn't even talk about advertising in this way back then. So
or even corporations. I mean, that's like why Teddy Roosevelt essentially changed, you know, the norm in terms of the relationship between government and the economy and the people, was because he was the first president to be like, hey, this is a different world than it was.
Right.
We have giant mega corporation monopolies that run the country.
Yeah.
Things are different now.
Totally.
You know, this is an unchecked power, and I mean, you can argue about his response, but his response is, well, government has to be the check on big, you know, corporations and monopolies. And his ideology, which also was adopted by Franklin Roosevelt, because they were both capitalists, very much. They came up in capitalism. They were wealthy people. They were totally into capitalism, but they, being intellectuals as well, and seeing what happened with the Russian Revolution, and seeing what was happening in our own country, said the only way to keep capitalism as alive is to curtail its worst instincts through government regulation. If you don't provide a basic standard of living for the people and ensure that capitalism's worst excesses are kept in control, eventually the people will overthrow it entirely. And ironically, if the capitalist class listened to that, there'd be a robust welfare state that would keep people complacent and okay with everything. But I think their own greed leads to their downfall. They're too interested in their own short-term profits to even think about the long-term viability of the economic system that gives them their power.
Totally.
Well, and that gets to my underlying. That was like what I was talking about earlier about like elucidating the underlying ideas that the monopolies have to do. I mean, in that case, where it was like, if you do have the welfare state, where it's like, you do, like...
See, but if they were behaving rationally,
yeah,
they would have kept the New Deal moving.
Yeah.
Instead, they've been trying to undermine it methodically ever since then. So we see that the profit motive in the short term is even more powerful than their own sustainability.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Which is, I mean, I think... it's hard, because
it's their
like,
biggest
what
weakness,
is
too,
the
though.
reason?
It shows, well, because... it's an ideology. It's a pathology, really.
Right. I'm not actually asking what the reason is why they do it. Why is it that it was allowed to be done? I get why they want it. I get why they.
Why didn't the government stop it? Is that what
yeah. It was like why was the New Deal able to be undone?
I mean, the only reason the New Deal was able to happen in the first place was a complex scenario where, you know, you had the economy totally crashed. You had business interests scared because the people had organized themselves into such a militant, you know, union activism that there was talk of revolution.
Yeah.
Real revolution.
Yeah.
And the rich were more afraid of that than they were motivated by their desire for profits. They had to reach that level where their fear overtook their desire for more profit. And they were willing to give Roosevelt the power to distribute their wealth, you know, to the population, lest they lose all of it.
Totally.
You know, but as soon as that present danger went away, their natural impulses returned.
It's just odd to me that the organizations didn't really, the people, the unions or whatever, the people organizations didn't somehow.
Well, they tried, but that was the first thing they did is they crushed all of those groups. I mean, the center of the union movement was the communist and socialist parties, and so they started by targeting them during the Cold War, which happened right after World War II. They moved directly to the Cold War, which was as much about internal warfare as it was about external warfare. It was a way to crush the organized sectors of the population that had stripped them of that much of their wealth and power.
Yeah.
There was revenge.
Totally.
You know? And so they just began dismantling the union movement bit by bit. I mean, now I think it's... I could be totally wrong about this. I know the statistic is something like 3% now are in a union, and it used to be, like, enormous. I know you can look at the graph, and it shows inequality of wages and percentage of Americans in a union, and it's literally like they're neck and neck, and then as soon as unionization goes down, inequality of wages goes up in like an inverse relationship. So
you just need like a balance of the two.
Well, that's how you keep capitalism in balance. But I think capitalism inherently is incapable of staying in balance. I think that's what that historical lesson shows.
Yeah.
Is that they will always be working to get more and more power, and it just is this boom-bust cycle.
Well, I think that's not...
It's, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it's 10.7% in 2017.
10.7? That's better than I thought. Can you look up what it was? Like, is there like a graph where you can see union membership change over time?
Year chart.
See what it was in like the 50s,
Yeah, it was really high.
40s or 50s?
This is from the Fiscal Times, and it puts it at, in 1984, it was up around 20%.
Well, 80s is,
Yeah,
we were already well into the attack by then. What about like the 50s and 40s?
Let's see here. This is from the Daily Signal. This one looks good. In 1945, we hit the high at 35.5%.
35.
In the 30s, it was like 12%.
Yeah, so
1935 is 13.2.
About the same as it was in the 30s too.
And then steady decline.
well, it was
Yeah.
Roosevelt that passed. Actually, I mean, it was not a legal right to join a union until Franklin Roosevelt. So pretty crazy.
I mean, I think that
Unions still existed, but they weren't official. It was just organized workers. That's what it was.
the only reason why I don't like throw capitalism completely out as it is like because I understand that there may be some point to have that like kind of idea that there wants to be some like efficiency, you know?
Well, see, but
It seems
now
the
this is
archetype.
getting into an interesting conversation because the way the average person defines capitalism
Yeah.
is primarily about markets.
Right. Mhm.
And yet I don't think, in my view, and I mean I'm echoing the thoughts of Richard Wolff and other economists of that persuasion, but markets are not unique to capitalism.
Oh,
You
no.
can have markets without capitalism.
Right.
What defines capitalism, as in the economic system we've had for the last few hundred years, is capitalists.
Yeah.
Is people who control a large amount of capital, create an institution in which it's a top-down, hierarchical, authoritarian institution, you know, and their control at the top and their personal incentives as a concentrated power structure. And then you also have a market that they're functioning within. But you can have a market without the capitalists.
Yeah,
you know,
definitely
things like
get
a
that.
democratic cooperative.
Yeah.
You still have markets. You still have people making products and selling it and others buying it, and it's a
Right.
market.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have capitalists. It's a completely different structure. It's a democratic, bottom-up structure,
I don't
which is
know-
radically different.
I don't know if we can force the democratic.
See, we can
we
talk
can
about
give
tactics.
incentives for businesses to switch over, and like the whole like giving loans to businesses that want to start out.
Right. Subsidize.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different... That's a whole other fish. Because there's a lot of different ways to implement. There's two different conversations. There's, would it be better if it existed? Then there's, how do we implement it? Those are two different things.
I think the main thing with economy is we need to figure out what is necessary for living. We should find out a base of what we want to
Yeah.
control,
Yeah.
and then the government needs to have strict regulations over that so that those bases can't be taken.
Yeah.
Like healthcare is a huge one that's just like skyrocketed. Even education, it's
Yeah.
skyrocketed where no one can afford it anymore.
Exactly.
So those need to be highly regulated by the government. And then you can have free trade, you can have capitalism in all the luxury resources that aren't necessary for life. And you can incentivize having democratizing some of these corporations.
Yeah, I think at the very least we should aim for having half of the economy democratic, because I think you need to establish, essentially just restart the race. I think you need to create a new sector of the economy that's based off a different model and allow them to compete in the market. See which one people like better, you know? That's what capitalism always is talking about anyway.
Right.
So fine, let's play your game.
Well, and experimentation in general. Right?
Yeah, it's experimentation. And you know what? I believe that the American people are going to choose businesses run democratically by their fellow citizens over autocratic institutions.
That's why,
And they're going to choose to work at them.
Yeah, hopefully.
So they're going to vote with their feet and with their money and their labor.
And if a company gets over $100 million in sales, maybe it should have to offer an option for the
To sell it to the
employees
workers.
to buy it out, and you can even subsidize loans through the government to help
Exactly.
those
You're saying
employees
exactly.
slowly buy that company, and then they can run it. They can hire. They can vote in their own leadership and everything.
Yep. So just a note, that is essentially the policy of Jeremy Corbyn in the Labour Party in Britain. He's currently the leader of the opposition party, so the equivalent of the Democratic Party here in the United States. And his position would be that any company that was either going to go public or sell its location would have to first offer right of first refusal to its workers to buy out the company and run it democratically. And if they choose to do so, the government would provide them with the loans and the assistance to transition it until it was viable. So that's definitely one option.
That's what I mean. Like, I think that really hits the nail on the head of what I was saying about what we mean by big government, because it's when we've elucidated the ideas of what it is necessary to survive, that's not a big government. I don't think. I think that's kind of what we did in the past.
That's that conversation again. What makes government big?
Is
it
I
just
think,
money being utilized, in a collective way, or is it government power?
I think it's really just when you have some organization that is going to say what in the realms of what we've decided is creative and can be where freedom should lie. It's someone having more say over what's occurring in that than they should. But I think when we can say that okay, well, you need these things to live, I don't think that is I don't think that's too big.
Yeah.
Regardless of what it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's as long as we can say definitively that this is what is needed to live, that should not be an option.
And I don't think the government should own hospitals and stuff. I think they should.
No, I don't either.
I think they just should be regulated. So it's not necessarily a big, it's not even a big
Well, so single payer, they don't own any of those companies, but they're the ones who are going to pay them. Our money goes to the government, and the government handles all the bills.
Yeah.
And it's still private businesses giving us the health care.
Because that way you still have the competition within the smaller private
There's still
hospitals.
a market that they're
Yeah,
competing for, and it's always going to be there because people always need health. It won't be as lucrative, but I don't think it needs to be as lucrative.
Exactly.
I mean, they're making
Well, and
fucking
what the
shit
hell-
tons of money.
When we also talk about the state of our economy right now, it's what the fuck does even lucrative mean?
You're leaving at 2, right, Sean?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we gotta let's try to breeze through these. We can hit these
Oh, shit.
in more detail next time.
Okay.
But let's just quickly touch base on them. Okay, so first of all, there's that superdelegate thing with the DNC. So they're trying to appease the left of the Democratic Party. So in response to this change of the superdelegates, Donna Brazille, who's the former head of the DNC, put out a tweet. Okay, right after the vote, and it said, Democrats voted to remove automatic delegates. Look how she uses the term automatic delegates instead of superdelegates. Again, just some bullshit language. Automatic delegates. As in, they get to vote even though they're not tied to what the people voted for. Democrats voted to remove automatic delegates from the first round of voting. But we still have seats at the table. We are still in the room and very much capable of setting the menu. #PowerRising.
What
What
the
the fuck?
Yeah, exactly.
That's terrifying.
Exactly. And she just puts that on Twitter. Like, what the fuck?
Power rising.
Power rising.
Woo!
Yeah.
I'm gonna go retweet
Authoritarian elitism.
Yeah.
Woo! So that's nice.
That was crazy. That's legitimate. Yeah.
That you can. It's still up. You can go look at it.
It's
Donna
just
Brazille.
like the fact that like someone who is in that much power is legitimately being like, we don't give a fuck what the people say.
Yeah,
We're
dude,
not
yeah, it's
going to
barely-
listen to it, and we
They're
will do
pulling
our
back
best.
the veil.
Yeah.
More and more, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, you just push through the rhetoric a little bit, and it's just a fucking. All of it's a fucking lie. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's
It's, and they're not even ashamed. Like they just believe in it. They believe in that shit. But anyway. So another thing is activists convinced the Democratic Party to stop taking donations from fossil fuel companies.
Oh, nice.
Except then, less than a week later, they reversed it.
Okay.
And their explanation was that it disenfranchised labor within fossil fuel companies because they want their companies to look out for their interests. So really, this was a pro-labor move, according to the Democratic Party, to take money from big oil.
The fuck, dude.
Yeah. So that's good.
I mean, I guess they're not technically wrong.
Why don't they just get labor from literally?
Yeah, and I take money
anywhere
from
else?
big banks because you know, looking out for bank workers.
Yeah.
Really, that's what I'm
Yeah.
gonna do.
Same
Not
with
for the little
Russia.
guy.
I don't want anyone in Russia to lose their jobs.
Yeah, right?
Better take their money
Yeah.
too.
I'm pro-labor.
Yeah, exactly. Like,
Such
anywhere else.
bullshit. Such
Anywhere
bullshit.
else.
Wow.
Because
Alright.
big oil is really looking out for their employees
I know,
too,
right?
Yeah.
They're good representations of what we think.
So the biggest news in the cycle right now has to do with Trump because an anonymous op-ed was posted in the New York Times. How many of you guys know about this?
I don't know.
Nope.
Oh, this is big shit.
Just read about
So the New York Times posted an anonymous op-ed, and they confirmed that they know the identity of the person. That is a senior White House official within the administration.
it. Yeah.
This op-ed,
What's
I've
an
got
op-ed?
it's an opinion piece.
Oh, okay.
So here's a few quotes from this op-ed, and it's essentially a senior White House official saying that there are people in his administration working to stop him because he's crazy, and here's why.
Okay.
And this is clearly a conservative person because they said we're in favor of many of the policies he's passed, things like tax cuts, things like bolstering the military. So this is a conservative person within a conservative administration, but they're worried about the president.
Okay.
The dilemma, which he does not fully grasp, is that many of the senior officials in his own administration are working diligently from within to frustrate parts of his agenda and his worst inclinations. The root of the problem is the president's amorality. Anyone who works with him knows he is not moored to any discernible first principles that guide his decision-making. Meetings with him veer off topic and off the rails. He engages in repetitive rants, and his impulsiveness results in half-baked, ill-informed, and occasionally reckless decisions that have to be walked back. And he has a preference for autocrats and dictators. A couple examples paired with this was in the wake of a chemical attack in Syria, he asked the Secretary of Defense, Jim Mattis, to assassinate Assad unilaterally, just straight up. And Mattis told the president, yes, sir, we'll do that right away, sir. And then as soon as he left the room, said, no, we're not doing that. We're going to do something more measured. Another example was Trump demanded that we end our trade deal with South Korea just on a whim. And so they had to bring him papers for it and all that. And the Secretary of the Treasury, I believe, took the paper off his desk when he wasn't looking. And then Trump forgot. So that's the kind of shit going on in the White House.
That's crazy.
So that's going through the news cycles right now because that's a big thing.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is obviously we have the confirmation hearings for the new Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh. He's written things in the past explicitly opposed to Roe v. Wade.
Really? Wow.
And of course he's doing his little dance, I don't want to talk about specific things. I'm going to be an objective judge, all that jazz. So he's avoiding all their questions.
Right.
Another really disturbing thing is he's written things in the past saying essentially that the president can't be prosecuted. He doesn't think the president can be prosecuted. Here's a couple quotes from a position he had in lower court. No single prosecutor, judge, or jury should be able to accomplish what the Constitution assigns to the Congress. So he's saying because Congress has impeachment power, that the president should be immune to judicial prosecution. which is really weird. to
I thought
me.
that was the truth, though. Like, unless they were impeached, they couldn't be brought up on criminal charges.
Is that the case?
I'm pretty sure.
I'm
And
unaware of that.
I don't know if that's
Well,
official, but
I
I think
don't
that's
know-
the precedent.
I don't know why he would say that if that was already
That's a
the
good
way
point.
it is. I really
See if
don't
I
know.
can
You
find
should look it
anything
up.
about
So let me follow with this next quote while you're looking that up.
that. Yeah.
The indictment and trial of a sitting president would cripple the federal government, rendering it unable to function with credibility in either the international or domestic arenas. Such an outcome would ill serve the public interest, especially in times of financial or national security crisis. I think that's a bullshit argument
Yeah,
because if there's a legal matter making the president unable to perform his duties, he should temporarily have the vice president fill in for his role.
Totally.
That argument saying the president should be immune to legal, redress
Yeah.
because of his position of power. I mean, you're essentially calling him a king in my mind, but
Totally. Well, there's also there's like the whole idea that if the president gets assassinated or is somehow gone, it's like we have the
you have a chain of command.
Chain
you
of
have,
command,
you
exactly.
it's not just has to be the president.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's speculated that this is the reason why Trump picked him is because he wants a judge on the court who will try to get rid of the Mueller probe
Gotcha.
into Trump's
Right.
activities.
So this is from CBS. Apparently, it's a tricky legal question with no easy answer. Scholars are divided on the issue, and it's never been definitively settled. Rudy
Giuliani, that's
Giuliani,
one of Trump's attack dogs.
President Trump's personal lawyer, says the president cannot be indicted. Ooh, who would have thought
Shocking.
that? And he says the special counselor Robert Mueller's office agrees with that assessment. However, Mueller's team has not confirmed what its opinion on the matter is. So basically, it's not
An unsettled
explicitly
legal
said
question.
in the Constitution, and the Supreme Court has never ruled either way.
So we very really could be having an imminent constitutional crisis, and Trump's stacking the court with a judge that will rule in his favor.
It looks that way.
Fun.
Isn't that great?
So that's where we're at.
Yeah. What do you think the odds of him being impeached are?
I don't know. I think this op-ed makes it more likely because now you're having administration officials come out. Well, there's a couple interesting things with this. So first of all, it's been stated that this could also be people within the administration trying to shield themselves from what's going to happen to the president. So if the president gets kicked out, they'll be like, no, we've been trying to stop him. We're the good guys.
Sure, yeah.
We're not complicit in his
Covering their
administration. They're covering their ass.
Mm-hmm.
And then...
But that's also... I mean, it sucks that they're doing that if they are just as liable for all
Right.
these things, but it's also good that he's sort of losing his support base. That
Yeah.
It's getting to the point where people
Yeah.
are like, I might need to jump ship.
So that makes me think impeachment could be possible if they're trying to cover their ass like that.
Right.
Because, I mean, those people trying to cover their ass are probably the most tuned into the shift in the political winds.
You'd think.
know?
Yeah.
I'm also worried about like the impeachment just leading to
Oh, Pence might be
violence.
worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. He'd certainly be more effective, but, I mean, there is, I don't know. That's a whole nother question.
Yeah.
What's worse?
I
The
feel like-
actual Republican agenda enacted with, methodical success, or kind of just this freewheeling crazy person? Like,
It's a good question. I feel like for the integrity of the nation,
the
like whatever's
stability would
whatever's
be better
left.
served by...
Yeah, I'm just thinking in terms of our
Yeah.
public image and
Yeah.
the view that the average person has of the government.
Yeah.
I feel like that has been just destroyed
Oh,
by
yeah,
the Trump
completely.
administration.
See, but
whatever
now...
was left. And
there's-
so whether or not that's a good thing, I'm not sure. about.
Exactly.
But the impeachment, I think, would if he actually got
Return
impeached,
stability.
I think it would return some of that.
See, I actually think that might be a bad thing, because, again, I'm of the persuasion that we need people to get out and radically change the system. So, to me, having someone kind of pull the curtain back and show that the emperor wears no clothes is a boon to, public consciousness and...
Right. And to have that happen and see all the shit that he's done and then have him get away with it all.
Yeah.
That might be what
Yeah.
pushes people over
Exactly.
the edge.
So that's a debate. There's a real debate there.
For sure.
Pence scares me because he is a evangelical Christian, and that's some hardcore shit, which we can get into another time as well.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some scary shit there.
For sure.
Oh.
All right. Well, I think we should go ahead and end it there.
All right. Well, Drew's not here to push the plug.
Just
so.
since Sean has to get going.
Well, next time.
We'll just edit.
Good shit. Good shit.
Yeah. When we should set a date for the next one.
Yes, we should.
My friend is going to be in town, Chris, and he would probably be a lot of fun to have one of these conversations with.
That'd be awesome.